Years ago, when Sound of History was still just a podcast and not a YouTube channel, I used to have my friend Jacob on to talk about music conspiracy theories. We talked about some of the major ones. Is Paul McCartney been replaced? Who killed Tupac and Biggie? So I thought it would be cool to keep that going. Jacob is a part of a podcast called What's Your Spaghetti Policy? It's a really fun, funny podcast. So you should definitely go check that out. But we've been friends for a long time. He's a really big fan of true crime conspiracy theories, so he's the perfect person to tell these stories to. He also knows very little about music history, so it's always fun to get his perspective on these things that kind of feel old hat to some of us but are new to him. So I hope you enjoy this kind of conspiracy theory from music history. Once again, I am joined by my friend Jacob. It's the first time I'm saying this, by the way. We're not redoing this.
Hey, how's it going?
My friend Jacob from the What's Your Spaghetti Policy podcast.
Hey, how's it
His links will be in the description below.
Yep.
Anything you want to introduce?
That's pretty much it. We got a Patreon, but hey, just listen to the
Patreon.
podcast for that if you want to. Hey, don't worry about it right now. It's all good.
They have a YouTube channel, so go over there and subscribe to that. It's fun. Just dudes hanging out, talking.
It can be fun for sure sometimes.
All right. Well, we're here to talk about another conspiracy theory that's not really a conspiracy theory this time. It's a little bit different than normal. I mean, there is a little bit of like a conspiracy thing at the end, but it's not one we have any hope of solving. So.
Hey, we are O for whatever we are now. So, but then again, that's the thing about
we might have gotten a few, right?
Well, that's the thing about conspiracy theories is that it takes time.
The story I'm telling you today is about the connection between the Beatles and a series of murders. You ready for that?
I'm kind of excited. I don't want to jump in too far, but it sounds like
Well,
the Beatles murdered some people, and that's exciting.
How much do you know about the Beatles? Like, what is your level of knowledge?
I haven't listened to a single Beatles song. Willingly, I will say.
I feel like you've heard at least some, just like in passing.
I don't know how much you want to divulge about your past, but we did work together at a certain restaurant, and I don't know if they played the Beatles on the radio or not, but they might.
I don't remember them doing that, but they might have.
But my knowledge, zero. I would say my zero starting level right now.
I mean, we have a whole Sound of Conspiracies podcast episode about one of them potentially being dead.
That's right. I guess I do have a little bit more knowledge. So it's like 5. I'm like a 5 out of 10, I know.
Well, by the time the Beatles released their 9th album, which was a self-titled album just called The White Album because it's just got like a white cover.
Nice.
In 1968, they were already on top of the musical world. Their previous album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, was a massive success.
Okay.
And it kind of positioned them as like revolutionaries in the industry and in the hippie flower power counterculture that was happening, capable of doing more than just pop songs. They were making more experimental, groundbreaking music.
And the U.S. government hated it. The U.S. government was not a fan. So
Sgt. Pepper's wasn't the first time that they kind of put that out there, but it's the one that people point to as being like their most sophisticated album. So they weren't afraid to try new things at this point in their career. They didn't need to establish themselves anymore. They were already there. They don't need to try and make it into the charts like anything they release is going to.
They were just coasting, and that's kind of what you want to get to as a band, I think, because you want to coast.
They had also started their own record label called Apple that was going to be, and this album was going to be the first on that label. They were definitely the biggest band in the world, one of the most influential in the late 60s hippie flower power revolution. What the Beatles did, everyone followed, essentially. But also by this point, Paul McCartney and John Lennon weren't exactly writing songs together. People tend to think of them as this like songwriting partnership because any song one of them wrote, the other one would be credited as a songwriter on it as well. Beatles songs were always credited as Lennon-McCartney as the songwriters, even though really one of them would be the writer.
Okay. So it's like they took turns basically writing, or one of them would write a song and the other one would be like, just include me in like the credits. It's fine.
Right. It's like Paul would write some songs, John would write some songs, then they would bring all of those to the recording session and kind of hash out anything that wasn't working. They both got writing credit on whatever they put out as the Beatles.
Did they get along as a band? I don't know much about the Beatles again, like you said to begin with. Okay.
Not at this point.
Okay. You got to think after spending 9 albums with how many people? Like 5 other dudes, right? Or 4 other dudes,
4.
I guess. I can imagine that things get a little testy.
So on that White Album, Paul had written a song called Helter Skelter.
I heard. Why does that sound familiar? Is that
You've probably heard
is that
something about it.
part of another conspiracy? Because is that the one you play backwards or something of that nature, or was it like
I
the
think
one that they
so.
hid? I think they might have hid like quote unquote hid lyrics about like the replacement of Paul McCartney. I feel like that's where I heard that.
Maybe. But we're going to be talking about it in a different way
Okay,
on this
all
episode.
right.
So in England, a Helter Skelter is like a carnival attraction. It's basically a slide that looks like a lighthouse.
Okay.
So it's like a lighthouse. You climb up the middle of the lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go around a slide that like kind of goes around the lighthouse.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds very simple, but it was the 50s or whatever. So.
Yeah. That was probably you probably rocketed down it and like
Right, yeah.
reached like Mach 2 speeds and you end up like colliding with a brick wall at the bottom they have to stop you and like probably it contributed to like a few deaths, but they were like
Probably.
it's fun for now, you know. It's 1950s. Relax, okay, relax.
It was actually, there's been different variations of it, but it first appeared in Blackpool in 1906. But
Okay.
that lighthouse slide around is the general idea of a Helter Skelter.
The more that I think about it, the more I think that it becomes a death trap. Like every iteration of it just
Anything
becomes
back then.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So Paul said about that song in a Helter Skelter, quote, "A lot of people in the US still don't know what a Helter Skelter is. They think it's a roller coaster. It's actually another fairground feature, conical with a slide around the outside. We went on them loads of times as kids." Seems pretty innocent so far. He's just wrote
Okay.
a song about a slide. The opening lines of the song seem to back up that Paul was just talking about a slide. The opening lines are, "When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide, where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride till I get to the bottom and see you again." So,
All right.
pretty straightforward,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like he's talking about riding a Helter Skelter. That's what it sounds like to me.
He said that he used the slide to symbolize life, its ebbs and its flows, its ups and its downs. He also said that the song was about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, but that doesn't seem to make a ton of sense
Hey.
when you kind of look at the lyrics.
That was
So it
big
might
on
have just been
TikTok,
like
yeah.
an offhand comment that he made. And it's not really about that.
Yeah, honestly, as a band, you get to the point where you're 9 albums deep or whatever it was, right? You're on top of the world. You can just say whatever you want.
For his part, John Lennon said that Paul wrote the song alone, and as far as he knew, it was pretty meaningless. Another thing that inspired Paul to write the song was hearing a band called The Who say that they'd written the loudest, dirtiest, rockiest song that they'd ever recorded. And Paul thought that that sounded like a ton of fun. So he wanted to write one as well.
I like it. I like the reasoning.
He had like a book come out recently where he kind of went through his lyrics and stuff. And he wrote in that, "I loved that description. So I came into the studio and said to the guys, let's just see how loud we can get and how raucous. Let's try and make the meters peak."
It's just, but we're talking about a carnival ride. But
Right.
it's like I
And
wanted
the Roman
it,
Empire.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like you want it to be super hardcore and metal, but then it's like I go to the top and I ride down the slide and then I go in circles and then I go back up again.
He said also after he heard the song that The Who were talking about, it was kind of tame and it definitely wasn't their rockiest. So he's like, I could definitely outdo that. So
Yeah, so he writes
they
it
went
about
to
the
write
Helter
Helter
Skelter.
Skelter.
Let's go.
So at first, the main controversy around the song was that it could be interpreted as being very sexual, which wasn't as big of a deal at the end of the 60s as it was in like the 50s when they were coming out, but still isn't like the best thing for the older people.
Yeah, they hate for some reason. It's like we're all here, you know. They just can't stand the fact that like people do that kind of stuff, you know.
But then some guy heard Helter Skelter and he found something entirely different
Here we
in
go.
it,
All right.
forever changing the meaning of the song for many people. That guy's name was Charles Manson.
Oh, like the Charles Manson.
The Charles Manson.
I was
So
like,
what
for
do
a
you know
second there, I
about
was like-
Mr. Manson?
I know that he technically has 0 body count, but he did contribute to the murders of a few people because he convinced a flock of people to go and murder them. Like I think it was a rich family.
Flock of people.
Yeah, I don't think it's like 5 or 6. I don't know the complete details, but yes, I do know that he's a bad guy, and I nailed it.
He was. He is dead now.
Oh, is he? Is he? When did he? Okay, good for him.
Passed away a few years ago. Still in jail.
Good.
Charles was the son of a teenage mother, and he spent most of his younger life in and out of prisons for things like armed robbery, stealing cars, the usual. By 1967, he was living in San Francisco and had attracted a group of followers because he was a super charismatic guy with interesting ideas that a lot of people on heavy drugs are very interested in.
Kind of crazy how that happens, honestly.
And especially since these people were in the free love culture, so they were kind of ripe to hear something new and something revolutionary.
It always baffles me whenever the people who are like free love, love everybody, flower power, whatnot, are like, let's just kill some people. Come on, guys. And they're like, now that you say it that way,
Yeah.
I know that I love everybody, but let's murder people. That sounds pretty cool, And it's hey, it works every time,
So by 1968, his followers had become a cult known as the Family. So it's Charles Manson and the Family. Throughout the summer of 1969, members of the Family, on Manson's orders, carried out a string of murders, the most well-publicized one being the actress Sharon Tate, who was the wife of famous producer Roman Polanski, or director. He's not a producer. He's probably a producer too. They all are. They're director producers.
They do something,
One of the murderers, a guy named Tex Watson, said that Manson sent them to the property and told them to kill everyone there. So they did. Manson was arrested and convicted for issuing the murder orders. He spent the rest of his life in prison, dying in 2017 from complications of colon cancer.
R.I.P. I guess. No, actually, rest in piss is what I mean by when I say R.I.P. I guess. So.
Yeah. The way Manson kind of attracted his family was by giving them prophecies and visions. And one of his biggest prophecies was his idea that there was a coming race war between white people and black people, which black people would win. So you think that's different for a white guy to be prophesying that black people are going to win? Maybe he's not racist, right?
I would argue more so that that's a scare tactic, and he just as much as racist as the other guys, because he's just trying to fearmonger you into believing that this race war is coming, and you got to kill a bunch of people to stop it.
Well, a little bit different. Yes, he is more racist, but in a different way, because he wanted during that race war, as it's playing out, the family would stay hidden, and at the end, after the black people win,
they would save the day.
They will emerge at the end, and they will subjugate the winners because they had superior intellects.
I don't like white supremacists. I'll just go ahead and say it. I know it's a controversial statement. Bold stance in this country right now. But they're never smarter. 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, I'll say it. I'll be bold. They're never smarter. They never have superior intellect. The people who are the white supremacists, dumbest people on earth. So I'll say it. Hey, crucify me. I'll say it.
So his family was living in the deserts outside of LA, staying at this old film studio lot where they used to film Westerns. And they were waiting for the race war to leave LA in shambles so his cult could swoop in and take over. But in order to do that, they needed to initiate this race war because it didn't look like other people were going to. So he's like, well,
you got to do it yourself.
I prophesied it.
Yeah. You've got to do the prophecy yourself. The rest will come later.
In order to prove his theory of a coming race war, Manson pointed to the White Album from the Beatles, specifically to the song Helter Skelter, and other songs like a song called Piggies and one called Revolution Number 9. So he pointed to them as people that they got it. They were the other people who knew this prophecy and knew what was coming, and they're kind of subliminally referencing it in their songs. And since the Beatles were these leaders of this revolutionary counterculture at the time, his followers are going to pay more attention to them. So
that is okay. I can kind of see it being, if it was truly one of those things that is a dog whistle, right? You got the album's called White, then you got Helter Skelter, and it's oh yeah. So I could see it, but also it's just really stupid. So. Yeah. It's they're just making music. I don't they probably were under a lot of drugs as well, the Beatles. I don't know a whole lot about their drug use, but I can imagine this was it Paul that wrote this one? Is that what he
Yes.
I just imagine he's hanging out one afternoon. He's I just want to write a song about this ride that I used to ride as a kid. So.
Yeah. I just want to write a loud song.
Yeah. Just make it really loud and about nothing.
So this idea of a prophesied race war that motivated the murders was first proposed at Manson's trial, and the prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi.
I think you nailed it. Either way,
sure.
You said it, nailed it.
He's actually the one who coined the phrase the Helter Skelter theory in order to explain why it all happened. Though there's been some pushback on the theory that this is the motivating factor in these murders. That's, I guess, a little bit of the conspiracy that we're getting. Did he take inspiration from Helter Skelter or did he not? The prosecutors seem to think he did.
So are they trying to use this as a defense? Are they? I
They're
don't.
using it as a motivation.
Okay,
They're trying to figure out why Manson did this.
got you.
And the theory they proposed was this Helter Skelter race war theory.
Okay, all right. I see. Because it sounds a little bit like they just didn't like the Beatles and they were trying any way they could to like put
I
them
think
on.
it's the opposite.
I don't know, because it's one of those things where
Wait, like the prosecutors
Yeah.
didn't like the Beatles, or Manson didn't like the Beatles?
if the prosecutors are the U.S. government, right? I would assume in this situation, like they're
Or
trying.
like a district attorney or
Yeah,
something?
I would assume that it's one of those things where like they want to make the Beatles out to be the bad guy in some way, some form, some fashion. Yes, they've
Okay.
got Manson. He's going down. He's going to prison. He's going to. But can we also take out two birds, one stone here and make people think that the Beatles are bad guys? Okay, I see the theory they're going with. Okay, so the Helter Skelter, it's actually not about. It's about a coming race war, etc. So okay, all right.
But Manson himself at his trial did seem to indicate that the Beatles music had something to do with it, because he said in his trial, it's the Beatles, the music they're putting out. These kids listen to this music and pick up the message. It's subliminal. It is not my music. I hear what it relates. It says rise. It says kill. Why blame it on me? I didn't write the music.
It
So
sounds a lot
that
like he's
was-
just trying to get away with murder. But like, hey, I didn't do this. Okay, they made the song, and they caused me to kill.
Exactly.
So it sounds to me like it's kind of a bogus argument. Like this guy's just grasping at straws right now.
It's also been suggested that Manson's primary way of preaching to the family was by singing songs, both his own songs and songs by the Beatles. Manson was a musician himself, but he couldn't make it as like in the industry.
Music's very
So he
bad.
probably saw in the Beatles what he wanted to be doing. So he like since he looked at the Beatles and he's like, that should be me. He clearly thought they were on the same playing field and that they shared his ideas as well. So then he goes looking for his ideas in their music.
Yeah. I wanted to be the one
probably how it
to
happens.
write a song about being a white supremacist who's eventually going to take over the world because the black people are going to win, and then we're going to save the day because we're going to get those black people for winning. And that's
Exactly.
And the Beatles, they think just like I do.
So Manson was also all about the California music culture. One of his biggest supporters was Dennis Wilson, who was the drummer of the Beach Boys. Dennis paid a ton of money for Manson to record his own album. The family lived at Dennis's mansion for a while until the Beach Boys manager kicked them out because they're weird and creepy. And he's like,
kind of like one of those
probably shouldn't
situations
be
where
associated.
you should know like who your friends are, and like maybe just do a
Exactly.
background check on your friends every now and then. You know, like, hey, who is this Manson guy exactly? You know?
But once they got kicked out of Dennis Wilson's mansion, that's when they moved out to the desert. It's probably a good move from the manager there. The Beach Boys did actually record a song that Manson wrote called Never Learn Not to Love, but they didn't give him any songwriting credit on it
Thank you.
because they changed a bunch of things
Yeah.
about it. And that kind of ruined the already strained relationship between Dennis and Charles Manson. Manson apparently threatened to kill Dennis after that.
Also,
So
like a weird thing to be like, hey, I'm just gonna like steal one of your songs and like change a few things.
It's kinda weird.
But like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's okay.
So Manson was also really connected to this guy named Terry Melcher, who was the son of a legendary jazz singer named Doris Day, and Terry was a record producer. Terry had gone back and forth on whether he was going to sign Manson to a recording contract. Dennis Wilson was really pressuring Terry to sign Manson. But as Manson got crazier and crazier, he started to have second thoughts about the whole signing him to a recording deal thing.
That probably for the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to trust
His
your gut
mother-
sometimes, you know.
Well, his mother, Doris Day, was actually the one who convinced him to leave Manson alone. Not long after that, Terry moved out of his house and Sharon Tate moved in.
Oh,
Manson knew that, but he was still fixated on that house. So he sent his followers there to murder everyone inside.
okay.
So that's kind of, unfortunately, how Sharon Tate wound up being in that house that he targeted.
Don't
So
buy
it all
houses.
comes back to the music
Yeah,
industry.
just don't buy houses is what I say. Because you never know who's going to show up to kill you, or has already killed somebody in that house, or is probably
fair.
living in the house to kill you eventually. You know?
So, according to Greg Jacobson, who was a songwriter living in LA at the time, and he was friends with Manson back in like 1968, Manson saw the Beatles as spokesmen for what he already knew was about to happen. Greg was also a prosecution witness at the trial, and he wrote about his experiences with Manson for like a Rolling Stone article in 1970 where he said, Helter Skelter became a symbol. He believed they were singing about the same thing he already knew about. He believed they were all tuned in together. He thought he would meet the Beatles. He even sent some telegrams.
I'm starting to think that this like Charles Manson guy has a few screws loose. I know. But
Just seems like he has this weird fixation on like the music industry and the Beatles, and he's trying to say they're with him when like they have no idea who he is.
and it's one of those things where like if he doesn't kill people, right? He just like never kills anybody. They for some reason his followers just like won't ever do it. He just becomes a blip and like he just becomes another fan, and they're like, I mean, because I gotta imagine that this isn't like a unique case that somebody's just like so obsessed with an artist that they're like, hey, you know, I see myself in your music, etc., and like really weird, really stalky kind of thing, you know, like stalky, like stalking them everywhere they go, but they just don't murder anybody or convince others to murder for them. So
the Beatles had tons of those, I'm sure.
It's just crazy. Like it's just. I feel like
not a lot with a cult following, to be fair, but
that is true. But I think you gotta make your own cult, you know, kind of. You just gotta do it yourself. So
Manson also convinced his followers that he was the only one who could actually interpret the lyrics and understand what the Beatles were saying. He said the Beatles were urging them to rise up and kill, to initiate the race war that would lead to them being in charge of LA. So that's what they did.
Hey, just a quick side, real quick. No, they're not. And in fact, if you start hearing things like, hey, kill somebody whenever you're listening to somebody's music, go seek help, you know?
Wrapping it up, if there's some kind of conspiracy for us to solve here, I don't think the conspiracy is whether or not the Beatles were putting these messages in their music. They weren't. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
No one believes that besides old Charles. I think the conspiracy is, what was Charles Manson's actual motivations? Was he inspired by this Beatles music, or was it something else?
My theory is that he needed help, sorry, past tense now,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and he was hearing things in the songs that, you know, kind of were like red flags. I would say that, honestly, Leo, if you want to get to the root of it, like he probably did get inspiration for the murders from the songs. But is that because the Beatles were intentionally doing that, you know, like subliminal messaging? Absolutely not. This was just more so, Manson's a crazy guy. He heard some songs that he likes, and he's like, you know what? Let's start a cult, because I think I hear something here, and it's sounding like an opportunity. So, but I'm interested to see like what your theories are, because mine's kind of straightforward and dry and cut.
So the one other piece of information to kind of blanket over this is that Manson really hated the Black Panthers.
Okay,
because he's racist and he does not like the Black Panthers.
Something
so that's something to keep
about
in mind.
Enough is the fact that he is a racist. Like it's kind of crazy. Like you always hear Charles Manson, you know, he's like always this pretty guy. He's like sings songs or whatever, but you don't ever hear about the fact that like he's kind of a jerk.
Okay, so the first theory is that Charles was hearing secret messages in the Beatles' music that made him want to initiate this race war that he saw coming, to kind of live out his racist fantasies of subjugating Black people and his hatred of the Black Panthers. That's like, he saw the Beatles giving him permission to do this, so he wanted to do it. That's kind of the first theory, the Helter Skelter theory, if we will. Other people have suggested that the Sharon Tate murders was just a cover-up of an earlier murder of a guy named Greg Hinman. Greg was a drug dealer. Someone in his family at Manson's orders had kidnapped and murdered. They like staged that murder to make it look like it was the Black Panthers. So the theory is that he then thought, well, we need another one to kind of corroborate that this one was. It's not an isolated thing.
Got you.
So he sent them to Sharon Tate's house, and they wrote like political piggy on the wall near these murder things to kind of make it seem like it was the Black Panthers doing it for some sort of message purposes.
That sounds like a legitimate theory.
Yeah. Or the other one is that he was just increasingly frustrated at his own lack of any musical talent and any ability to get his music career going. So he kind of like just snapped eventually.
Yeah.
And since Terry Melcher used to live in that house and Terry had rejected him and not signed him to a recording contract, for some reason, just like that house that he used to visit and used to talk with Terry was in his mind, so he just sent his people there. Like, that's a theory.
You know, a lot of times with, you know, people that like to take lives of others, like serial killers as they're also known, they do tend to latch on to like what others would see as kind of like ridiculous things. And so, like, being the last thing, like, okay, it was the last straw, finally snapped, and he's just like, you know what? I don't care who's in that house. I'm just going to imagine that it's Terry, and whoever's in there
Yeah.
is dead.
And then there are some people who say that, which like this isn't really a motivation, but they say it's just Charles Manson was just the inevitable outcome of the free drug love hippie movement. Like it
Okay,
always just
yeah.
was gonna kind of end in this because of the amount of like psychotic drugs and weird revolutionary think that was happening. Like people are just like, it's always gonna end this way. If it wasn't Charles Manson, it would have been someone else. That still doesn't answer why he did it. That just meant that he was like,
I do have an alternate theory to posit because I just
okay,
remembered
because that
it.
was my last one. I think my opinion is
Okay.
that it's just some combination of all of those.
I mean, and honestly, I'll give it to you.
There's a lot of people who have been upset about a failed music career that don't start cults and kill people. So
I
like
would
that's
argue,
part of it, but there's
yeah.
something beyond that too.
I would argue 95% of those times, yeah, that's probably the case. They're just like really upset about it, and they just move on with their life, and they start working at like Chili's until they get back on their feet. You know, they don't go and like start a cult and murder a bunch of people. All right, that's like 5% that happens. Alternate theory that I just remembered: MK Ultra. What do you know about that?
Where like the government experimented with drugs on people or something to make like a super soldier.
It's where the U.S. government used different kinds of hallucinogens. I think the one popular is LSD or LSD, not LCD, LSD, not the liquid crystal displays you see on your TV. No, they basically dosed them with a ton of LSD and then put them in very high strenuous situations, broke their brains to the point where they could be rewritten, and then made them into essentially like sleeper cell agents, right?
Okay.
And apparently, around the time that Charles Manson was like coming up, I don't know, not coming out. I don't know if he's gay or not. I don't know, whatever. But hey, good for him if he is. He had been visited by CIA agents, quote unquote, and they say that there is another theory that he is in fact a sleeper agent or a product of MK Ultra, and whatever you said earlier that like he was hearing things in the songs that kind of convinced him, and it's kind of said that like that was the trigger. Like that was the trigger for him to be like, okay, I got to go do my job and
All right.
whatever.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with throwing out of the conspiracies, but that's all I had. Not much of a like it's just what was Charles Manson's motivations. We're not going to solve that, but like just wanted to explain this story of a connection between the Beatles and Charles Manson that I think is pretty interesting.
I like to think that you did solve it, Nick, because
Thanks.
again, I think that it was a combination of all those, and I think that he was kind of a troubled dude. And what was his
Just a little
motivation?
bit.
What was his motivation? Just being a troubled guy and wanting to do bad things instead of going and getting help. He was like, let's kill people instead.
All right. Well, that's Helter Skelter. Thank you, Jacob, for joining me again for this. It's always fun.
A treat. I love being here. I love this. This is a great time. Keep it up. You're doing great. Congratulations on all the followers and the subscribers. You know,
Thank you.
Just keep being you, really. You know.
Thanks.
So,
and Jacob's links will be in the description. Make sure you go check out his podcast.
You don't have to. There's no
Patreon, all
obligation.
that fun stuff.
Yeah, if you don't go check it out,
No, you are obligated.
I don't know. If you don't go check it out, I'm not going to show up to your house with my murder cult. Don't worry. That's not a thing. I don't have one yet. But if I ever do, you won't be on the list. Don't even worry about it. It's not even about that. It's not even about the YouTube or whatever. So
Maybe you do and you don't know it, and that's the conspiracy. Maybe you're a sleeper cell.
don't do that because now I'm going to have anxiety.
All right. See ya.